doing, Mike?
Good. Great to see you. And it's glad to have you back on the show for the third time's the charm, but the other ones were charming as well.
I felt we've been charming the whole time. I consider you and I quite charming, but that's a
Yes,
whole nother story.
it's great to kind of just have these conversations. And as anyone who's
Oh,
watched
yeah.
these know, it's just like us sitting together having a cup of coffee. But my question for you right out of the gate, before we really get into the podcast episode is,
Sure.
are you still living up to the lifestyle of a wolf, or have you shifted ever so slightly?
Such a great question. So I'm changing. It is definitely something that is happening, which is kind of interesting. So for folks who may not have the context, number one, you should go back and listen to the previous podcasts that we did because they were awesome. We had a lot of fun with them and it's really great content. But to give everybody a little bit of context, what I'm kind of most known for, at least before this most recent book, is this idea of chronotypes. So this is a genetic predisposition for a particular bedtime. And so we call these people early birds or we call them night owls historically in the past. So everybody can kind of understand. You've heard of this conceptually. You may not have heard of the term chronotype, but you've definitely heard of somebody being called an early bird or a night owl. So what Mike's referring to is I've always been a night owl, like forever and ever and ever. Once I hit adolescence, it was like I basically wanted to stay up until 2 and sleep until 12. And I got news for you. In the adult world, that was not something that was looked highly upon. In fact, people would, like when I would refuse to have 7:30 meetings or 8 o'clock meetings, people would be like, what are you, lazy? No, I'm not lazy. My brain wants to actually be sleeping at that time. Fortunately for me, I was able to really start to study chronotypes and start to understand, hey, what are these? And here's what's so fascinating. The point I think you're bringing forward is chronotypes can change over time, right? And so I, for whatever reason, locked and loaded by about age 20, 25 as a night person. I always prefer that. I'm the guy where you say, hey, come meet us out at 10 o'clock. And I was like, sure, no problem. Right. And that was kind of my life and my lifestyle. In fact, kind of a funny side story. When I first met my wife, I said to her, hey, Lauren, what time do you want me to pick you up? She said, pick me up at 8. Right. Pick her up at 8. We go to dinner at 8:30. We'd finish dinner by 9:30. We'd go to the movies from 10 to 12. Then maybe out of the movies, we'd go get dessert or go get a drink. We get home by 2. That was normal for both of us. She, turns out, was a night owl as well. Right. And so it really worked well in our favors. Now we've been married for 26 years. And all of the sudden, I'm waking up at 5:45 in the morning. I got to be honest with you, bro. Like, I can't stand people that wake up at 5:45 in the morning. You know what I'm saying? They're all chipper and ready to go. I'm like, what are you talking about? Right? Where's my coffee? So what we know is that you will go through different chronotypical phases at different times in your life. Now, everybody probably has experienced this if you've got parents or grandparents that are still alive. And you say to them, hey, grandma, grandpa, let's go meet for dinner. What time do they want to meet for dinner? 4:30 in the afternoon, right? 5 o'clock, the blue plate special, right? And it's because their circadian rhythms are making them go backwards and they're starting to become even early birds.
Now, it's interesting because I feel like I'm shifting a bit as well.
How old are you?
I'm 50. I'll be 51 in a couple weeks.
So right in the 50s is where it starts to happen. For me, it was like between 53 and 55. I'm 57.
Yeah.
So you're right in the range.
And what I found already is I'm noticing that, the 2 a.m. is gone. The 1 a.m. is slipping away. Is not that I'm any better in the mornings. That's what pisses me off. I'm not any better in the mornings. I'm just not. So, I mean, again, the 5:45, if I don't wake up that early. I think typically it's like 7, which is still reasonable, but I'm ready to go. Like, I'm awake, right? And I'm like, all right. And what I'm finding is, while I can't, everything's shifting, but it doesn't mean I'm any better in the mornings, right? Like, you'll never, what I mean by that is, I don't think I'll ever be, quote, a morning person in terms of deep work. But I'll be but I will get up earlier and just that shift happens. So it's like, oh, well, Mike is not human until 9 a.m. now instead of 11 a.m., right? That kind of thing. I think that's what's happening is more the productivity prowess doesn't change. It's just
Right.
going to bed earlier. Everything just kind of shifted that way. At least I
Yeah.
found.
It tends to move, and it's kind of a slow process too, right? So all of a sudden you find yourself waking up early, but you're like, "Wait, I should feel awake earlier," and it doesn't really happen that way. It takes a good 3-6 months of your getting used to this, and again, your melatonin production is changing. That's what this is, by the way, just biologically speaking. What
Hmm.
is occurring is your melatonin is turning on or turning off at new times, right? As we get older, these times seem to get earlier and earlier. So melatonin has a tendency to turn on earlier in the evening and turn off earlier in the morning when you are a particular chronotype, the early chronotype, what I call a lion. So
Right.
that's the other thing is I changed the names,
Yep.
right? So early birds are now lions, night owls are now wolves, people in the middle are bears. And here's the weird thing, Mike, is I discovered a fourth chronotype. I think that's the
Yeah.
thing that I'm kind of
We've talked
most known for
the dolphin,
about
right?
the dolphin.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, people need to understand that, hey, you just might be genetically born not a great sleeper. And so if that is the case, let's figure out all the things that we can do to make your environment better and make your stress lower and all those things, because we know you're going to get affected. So let's make it easy. Right. And so when we look at chronotypes, and again, they can change, it gets very interesting very quickly.
That's a perfect segue to talk about the book Sleep, Drink, Breathe, because uh you talked about energize before when you co-author
Yeah.
the book, where
Mhm.
energy definitely like how to the patterns of exercise and all of that stuff with it. And right out of the gate, which I loved in the book, is you're not really pulling any punches when you say wellness is too fucking complicated.
It is too fucking complicated.
So
It's
so so
awful.
well, and the thing is, it almost feels like, to me, having spent 15 plus years in the productivity space, is that wellness
Right.
has kind of followed that pattern too, where it's like we're going to give you
Yep.
all kinds of different advice, and everyone tries to mimic what those things are, and there's so many that they get overwhelmed, and then they end up not doing. They just fall into old habits, right? So, can we talk about where like that concept of and why you've simplified it really down to like these three dominoes?
Yeah. So first of all, I love that idea that wellness and productivity are very similar thematically as we've been learning about them across the past 5 to 10 years, right?
Hmm.
And I think you're 100% right. It's throw as much stuff of it as you at it as you can, and then try to adopt and adapt, and hopefully something kind of works out for you on the back end. That's the reason why I wrote the book, because honestly, it is too fucking complicated. Like when I go to the gym, here's what happens is I'm sitting there, and this happens almost every time I'm at the gym. I'm in between sets or something like that, and I look up and there's somebody there who has a complete lost look on their face,
Is that me?
right?
Is that me?
Well, I don't know, maybe it is. But they're like, I don't know what am I supposed to do next? Am I supposed to get on the bike? Am I supposed to go to the sauna? Do I do a cold plunge? Do I have a green drink? Like, it's just an overwhelming amount of information, and there's no real starting line, right? And so for me, I started to think about it. And actually, I was reading a book called Life Gives to the Giver by my friend Joe Polish. And there was a chapter in there where Joe was talking about this idea that he called dominoes. I thought it was really interesting. And so he said dominoes are skills that once you achieve them, it allows you to knock over another skill. Like you can open up another skill. It kind of unlocks that
Hmm.
next level, if you will, if we're using gamer
Sure.
technology here, right? And so I was like, huh. So I wonder what the dominoes of wellness would be, right? And so then my brain went to, okay, well, what can you go without for the least period of time? Because that would feel like it's probably pretty important, right? And so air, that's one of them. Like you really can't go that long without air. Now I will tell you, in my studies and learning about breath work and breathing and air, there is a world record of somebody holding their breath for 23 minutes. Okay.
Yeesh.
Now this is one of those deep, deep, deep diver people,
Yeah.
that do the free dive. That's what it's called, free
Right.
dive. And this guy trained for 2 years, and he had special oxygen that he was breathing in before he did this. And then he went into a pool and he
Hmm.
stayed down and they did the whole thing. Okay. So that's not a normal human. Let's be clear. That's some superhero, right?
Right.
When you talk about normal people, right? There's a lot of people who have no idea, but basically you should be able to hold your breath for 90 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Minimum
Yeah.
60 seconds.
Yeah, there's those TikTok videos that have like, I've seen quite a few of them. They're like, hold your breath for this long. And it's got like this, I mean, again, it's not very scientific. It's obviously,
right.
But they show you like, hold your breath. If you hold it for this long, you're this. If you hold it for this long, you're that. And so I
Yeah.
see a few of those pop up. And yeah, I mean, luckily, it's funny because it's the same thing with a hearing test, right? Like how long before the beep disappears, right? So it's the same
Right.
thing with the breath thing. Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
totally.
And so what's interesting about that is, well, first of all, breathing, I would argue, is probably the single biggest primary function that our body has. So
Right.
that's probably one that it would make sense to start with and make sure that we're doing correctly, right?
Mhm.
Number two is hydration. So it turns out that you can make it about 3 days without any water going into your system, but man, it's awful. And by the way, you are almost knocking on death's door by the time you hit day 4 or 5. Like body's shutting down, functions are like, it's a mess.
Right.
Right. And here's what's interesting is like most people obviously don't get to that level, but when you start to look at the data, almost 40% of the entire United States is dehydrated at any given time. 40%. That's like, like that's 4 in 10 people. Like that's almost half the country. Right. When you start to look at something like dehydration, then you start to say to yourself, well, what does it matter? Like my body seems to be able to run even if I'm dehydrated. It does matter because the performance that you're able to execute on wanes dramatically with less water in your system. To be clear, like I think it's like almost, what is it? I think it's over 80% of your body is water. Right. And so when you lower that amount, what ends up happening is everything inside starts to shrink, like your brain.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that people don't know is when you become dehydrated, your brain actually starts to shrink. And when it wraps around those nerves, it causes a headache. That's in many cases where migraines come from. And so once again, this seemed like a very basic function to me. If you know how to stay hydrated and you know how to breathe, these are two of the primary aspects to wellness, right? Then, if I'm honest with you, I'm the freaking sleep doctor. So, of course, I'm going to throw sleep in there, right? Like it wouldn't make any sense for me to write a book about it otherwise. But I actually do believe that sleep is probably the next bodily function that you simply can't live without. I want to be clear. You can go a full 30 days without food. No problem. You can go a lifetime without exercise. Easy, right? There are plenty of people out there to do it, right?
Yep.
You can probably go about 4 or 5 days without sleep before it really starts to pull in on you. And I think the record is 11 days. And that kid was hallucinating. He didn't even know his name by the time it was all finished. He was drinking caffeine the whole time. Like it was a mess, right?
Which is hilarious because caffeine and no sleep means you're depriving yourself of hydration and sleep.
And sleep. Exactly. Exactly right. So he was really in a pickle for sure. Right. And so I said to myself, okay, like number one, I like the number 3. It feels like it's kind of like a good kind of way to look at this. And so I said, I'm gonna focus on these 3 things because I feel like if I teach people how to do these 3 things correctly, everything else is just gravy on the taters. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like everything else starts to work much better because I see so many people and they're like, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lose all this weight. And it's like, if you're not sleeping, I can assure you, you're not going to lose any weight. And if you're just going to the gym and you're not hydrated, I can assure you that your muscles are breaking down and you're not actually building muscles. You're losing muscles. And of course, if you're not breathing, oxygen is fuel for our entire system, right? And it's kind of funny because most people turn out to be shallow breathers, right?
Yep. Yep.
Like they don't really extend the lung. And people are always the other big question that I get, Mike, is like, why did you write a book about 3 things that our body does automatically, Michael? Right? Like shouldn't this unit just like operate and shouldn't it just kind of do the things it's supposed to do for me? Well, it can if you let it, right? But there's this thing called stress. There are these things called schedules. There's this stuff called work, family commitment, all of these other things that come down the pipe. And what happens? You push these things to the side because your body is very resilient. Your body can last a decent amount of time without these things or on lower levels of these things. But don't fool yourself. You are not running at optimal speed. Okay.
Right.
You are not being as productive as you can be. And I mean, let's be fair. You don't have to be the 100% productive 100% of the time.
Sure. You
right?
can't.
Nobody can do that. it's impossible. But at the end of the day, if your body battery is at, 12%, I'm pretty sure you're not functioning
Well,
the way in which you need to.
it's the difference between preventative and
Yes.
fixing, right? I mean, a car,
Absolutely.
you could run a car, but if you don't get tune-ups done, if you don't get the oil
Right.
change done, if you
Right.
run the car constantly with very little fuel, the fuel pump will start, like all of these things
Exactly.
were the same. What's interesting about this too is, as we're talking, by the way, the book that, and I know it's been mentioned in the chat, but people were asking about the book Life Gives to the Giver by Joe,
Yes,
right?
by Joe Polish.
Joe Polish, right?
Life Gives to the Giver. Great book.
And what I find is, as you were talking about this, these dominoes that you talk about, sleeping, drinking, breathing, we get signals. Like it's not like
All the
like
time.
so if, I mean, and there's three clear ones. Number one, if you yawn, that could be
I
it.
guess you might be tired.
If you are again, if you're looking at your urine and it's bright yellow,
Right.
there's a good chance.
A high likelihood that, or as an example, if you're thirsty,
Yeah.
it's so interesting
Yeah.
to me. So many people will say, "Oh, I've got a dry mouth," but they don't recognize that they're thirsty, right? And they eat things or drink things that make them have a dry mouth. Maybe they're diuretic, like caffeine or alcohol or things of that nature, and they don't even realize half the time that they're thirsty. They will realize that they're sleepy, but then what they'll do is they'll slug a cup of coffee, and perk right up, and now they're no longer sleepy, right? So
Which is hilarious, because that to me would be, again, we're going to get into some of the weeds here, because we're going to cover some of the stuff in the book, but we're obviously going to dance around some stuff because we want people to pick up the book, and go through these three simple things. But what they'll do is they'll chug the coffee instead of taking a nap, because taking a nap is, oh, well, come on, you need a nap. Yeah, exactly. There's that laziness attribution to it, right? One of the things I have about just the process of your body of work is you've gone wider with your work than because it was sleep, and then sleep and exercise, and now it's sleep, breathing, hydration. Normally we go the other way. Normally I find others and we go, okay, I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to dive into a very particular aspect of it. Like, so for example, as a productivity strategist who happens to be a night owl, down the line, a night owl book is on my horizon, because I'm going to niche down. You've niched the opposite way. Did you? I'm curious. A couple of things. Number one, there have been sleep. The pace of the world, the speed of the world. Is it almost like that battle? I'm not saying it's fought and you've kind of raised the white flag. That's not what I'm saying. But it's like, okay, there are some people that just, oh, I get enough sleep. Like they pass right by that. Like, I'm just curious about your thought process around this, because normally, like I said, it's the other way, or you just stay in that lane. Well, let's talk about sleep. I mean, which you have. You've obviously, sleep has been a part of every part of your work. So I'm just curious about that.
So believe it or not, I actually have 5 books. And if you look at the progression, my very first book was a how to teach yourself to fall asleep, like a DIY sleep book, which would make sense, right? New author coming onto the scene. Let's have a very general overall sleep book. Let's teach everybody how to sleep. By the way, that wasn't the intent of that original first book. The original first book was specifically supposed to look at how to sleep make you look aesthetically, right? So it was going to be called Beauty Sleep, right? And when I sold the book to the publisher, it turned out that my editor had insomnia and said, "You're not going to write the book that you thought you were. You're going to write a book about how you're going to fix my insomnia, and we're going to do this together." And that is exactly how my first book was written. So my first book was a DIY of how to fix your own sleep. My second book looked at sleep and how it affects diet. So I did get a little bit more narrow at that point, because it was called The Sleep Doctor's Diet, Lose Weight Through Better Sleep. Then I actually got narrow, but on a side topic, which was chronotypes, right? So I was niching down, as you're saying. However, once I did the energy book, if I'm honest with you, people were interested more in energy than they were in sleep, which sounds strange to say, but when you go across a large population, people are usually say, "Hey, man, I just want more energy and focus," and they don't really pay attention to sleep. So the idea was, let's do a book that focuses on energy, but the underpinnings of it is a sleep and movement program that will be helpful for you. So we broadened there. And then with Sleep, Drink, Breathe, I just got a wild hair and was like, God damn, this is ridiculous. Like, so many people are confused. Like, I need to give people a starting line so they know where to go and what to do. And that was kind of the progression of it was really kind of like, what is the world need right now? What is the world kind of looking for? What are they telling me? And that's usually how I work on my books. I would say my next two books, I'm potentially looking at things having to do with, for example, cannabis, psilocybin, because there's lots of people out there who use those substances, and there's no real good, single place to look up all the data and say what helps, what doesn't help, what's good, what's not good. Marijuana today is very different than marijuana that it used to be. Like, a lot of differences there. So that could be interesting. And then I also agree with you that I don't think night owls and nighttime work has been really focused on. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to do something in that arena as well.
Yeah, it is interesting because, when you look at this, it's pretty, the cover, Sleep, Drink, Breathe. By the way, when is this, Christina, who's in the UK, is this a paper? It's still in hardcover, right? Not paperback yet.
Still in hardcover. It will be in paperback in December.
Okay. So,
but there's the audiobook. And just to let everybody know, I actually read the audiobook myself. So
there you go. So let's get back to the Dominoes and kind of the way you process this. So obviously, first, like, is there the way that this book has kind of been illustrated is, or put together rather, is you don't need to follow the dominoes and like sleep, then drink, then breathe. You can focus on whatever domino you feel you need to work on the most, right? So can you give me an example of, for you personally, because you're, it's an itch you scratched, right? What was the one that you felt that you needed to, and please don't say sleep, that you needed to work on, that you felt, it might have been sleep because we've talked about the chronotype changes. What was the one that you're this is the itch I need to scratch? And then like the dominoes that you conquered, what would you say the order have been for you?
That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Here's what I'll tell you is I think hydration was first.
Yeah.
Because, you just don't monitor and you don't think about it. And once I started thinking about, like, how much water am I actually getting in my system, right? And wait a second, there are different kinds of water. There's mineral water, there's distilled water, there's regular water, there's filtered water. So what am I putting in? That was something that I didn't, we had one of those Brita filters at the house.
Yeah, the reverse osmosis, like all that. As a coffee guy, I'm like, oh, you need stuff. I'm like, do I? I remember, what's funny is you talk to anybody where I live in Victoria, and one of the coffee nerds that happen to be on X or Twitter or whatever, I mentioned the water, and the guy's like, the water here in Victoria is fine. You don't need to do anything to it to make better coffee. And I'm like, okay, great. So if I don't need to do anything to make better coffee, then you can drink it right out of the tap.
Right. Absolutely. So that was definitely something that I learned. And then another thing that I learned, and this was kind of interesting, was I learned a lot of water habits that people have that are actually not so great, but they think that they are. Let me give you an example. So this happens to me at the gym all the time, right? So I've got my water bottle, right? And I go over to the water bottle thing where, you can get your whole water bottle filled up. And there's always a line, right? And there's somebody standing in front of me. And here's what they do. They've got it under there. It gets about halfway. They pull it out. They pound it, and then they put it back in, right? And I am the asshole that taps them on the shoulder. And I say, hey, it's actually better if you sip, not gulp. And here's what they turn to me and say every single time. It's been very, very consistent. I'm just trying to get as much in as possible. And so I turn to them and I say, it's not going in, it's going through. Let me explain, right? And so what people don't realize is when you wake up in the morning, your body is kind of like a dried up sponge, right? So, when you walk out to the kitchen in the morning and you look at the sponge, it's like it's shrunk. It's like this little rectangle. It's barely functional, right? If you open up the water faucet full blast on that, what happens? The water hits it and splashes right off. It doesn't really do a whole lot. But if you open up the faucet a little bit and a few drops hit it, it absorbs, it expands. Now you have a useful tool, right?
Yeah.
We are the sponge, right? And that's what I started learning is if you sip, not gulp, because sometimes by the time I drink water, or at least it used to be, I was so damn thirsty. I would be like, "Gug, gug, 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 gug," and trying to quench that thirst. Meanwhile, I'm not quenching anything. I'm just literally throwing water down my gullet, hoping for the best.
You know what's also interesting is that most of that water is ice cold, and my wife, who works in Chinese medicine and acupuncture,
Which
like
you
it's
don't
not good. You do not want ice cold water because
at all.
So first thing in the morning, you gulping ice cold water is basically your
bad idea.
Both. But this harkens back to your work about energy and chronotypes, which is if you get up first thing in the morning and start working out, you're not going to, depending on your chronotype, it's not going to be as effective. Like, again, as somebody, I still have to work out later in the day if I'm going to do any kind of heavier exercise. Now, walking, doing that sort of stuff, like anything natural, kind of the blue zones kind of stuff, that kind of stuff, a little bit easier. But again, we live in a world that, especially in Western culture, where it's like, okay, let's do the 7-minute abs and the
crush
circuit
it and blah, blah, blah.
And I'm like, I've just found, and that's what I appreciate about the book is it's all things like you said we do automatically, but there's more if you do them with more intention.
Right.
Then that's
absolutely.
So breathing. I again,
this was my number 2.
Yeah.
Right. So hydration was my number 1.
Yeah.
Breathing was my number 2. And I'm going to be honest with you. I already participated in breathwork. Now, here's what I'll tell you, Mike, which was interesting to me. So as you know, I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I've been a clinical psychologist for 26 years with a specialization in sleep, blah, blah, blah. But nobody ever taught us about how valuable different kinds and types and methods of breathing can be to either increase your focus and energy level or decrease your anxiety. Nobody throughout my entire PhD process sat any of us down. Can you imagine how much help I could have given to people with insomnia if I had known and understood what I'm now been able to learn, which is breathing turns on or turns off something called your autonomic nervous system, right? So we have a nervous system. Generally speaking, it's called an autonomic nervous system. There are 2 branches. One is the sympathetic. The other is the parasympathetic. The way I remember them is, remember that old song from the Rolling Stones, Sympathy for the Devil?
Yeah.
Right? So then I think sympathy, I'm running away from the devil. It's fight or flight.
Okay.
Right? And so and by the way, you can give yourself a lot of energy to fight or flight by what? Breathing in and out, giving your brain more oxygen, giving it more fuel, right? Or you can do the opposite, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest. If you slow your breathing down on purpose and you use particular breathing techniques, it could be anything from alternate nostril breathing, right? So breathe in through one nostril, out through another nostril. It could be timed breathing. One of my favorite techniques is called 4-7-8 breathing. This is where you breathe in slowly for a count of 4 through your nose. You hold for a count of 7. You breathe out for a count of 8 through your mouth. Doing this in the middle of the night, roughly 20 cycles, will lower your heart rate and allow you to fall back to sleep. So for me, man, I was so impressed and by the way, it's not like this is new stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, people have been doing, we've been breathing since the dawn of time, but people have actually been doing breath work. Like if you go to India, if you go to Asia, if you go to all of these places where they learn things like Tai Chi and all these other meditative practices and all this breathing, like, by the way, we here in the United States have never figured this shit out. Okay. This has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Like, we should be addressing this. Like, in all honesty, I'd love it if we started doing breath work in preschool, right? Where we were teaching kids, hey, you know what? If you get upset because you didn't get a toy, that's okay. Let's do some breathing together to calm you down, right? Or you want to play such and such a game? Let's up your game by teaching you how to breathe before you go out and swing the bat or hit the ball or whatever you want to do, right? So I think there's some utility in all of these things. But for me, breathing was the next kind of domino that needed to fall. And to be fair, I was also going through this transition that we spoke of at the beginning of the interview
Mhm.
with my sleep, right? And so I
Right.
was moving myself from a night owl to much more of an earlier riser.
Right.
And so I had to really think through that because, here's the thing. It's like I'm a human being just like everybody else. And so on occasion, I have the same human things that happen to me that happen to other people. And even when it comes to sleep, right? Like I want to be very, very clear. Now, I'm going to also be honest with you. I didn't go into sleep medicine because I had a sleep problem.
Right.
A lot of people do that. A lot of people say, hey, I've got an issue or a family member has an issue. I want to learn about it and become that type of helper in the world. That wasn't it for me. But as a normal human, everybody has sleep shit. So you might as
Mhm.
well, jump on in and try to figure it out. And for me, during the book, the reason sleep was number 3 was because I was kind of making this transition. And so I had to really adjust my morning routine as well as my evening routine. And so that was where the adjustment came in for me.
Now, this actually is a nice tie-in to breathing and
Mhm.
sleeping. Mouth tape is becoming something that people are using
Yes.
more and more. It's becoming so. What's interesting to me is because I have some, and I've been
Mhm.
playing with a new. Someone sent me some, and I'll
Mhm.
share a bit more about that. In what day is it today? It's like the middle of June. So in the next couple of weeks, I got sent some, and they sent me. Again, sleep is becoming a real. Productivity and sleep have always been linked together, right? Like
Mhm.
from the
Yeah.
days where I mentioned that I take naps and somebody said, well, how can you take a nap? You're a baby. All of these things kind of, I'm like, well, because, the reset, the caffeine naps that Austin Kleon's
Yeah.
talked about. Um,
Yeah.
Sleep tape. I
Let's
put,
talk about it.
I put it on and
Mhm.
immediately. So why did I resist putting it on in the first place? Well, first off, um, it looks silly. Like it does. It like
Oh, it looks
it looks
ridiculous. But
absolutely like
I don't know I don't know where you're going, but I don't know if you're going to like the data that I'm going to present to you in a second about mouth tape.
well, yeah, we'll get there. And so I tried it, and I've worn it off and on because some night, you want to wake up. For the first day or two I tried it, my mouth was like, I woke up not in a panic, but just like, wait, what?
Mhm.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Because it's
Mhm.
unfamiliar territory. So
Yep.
it's becoming something. I mean, there's so many different, again, the wellness industry is a huge industry.
Yes, it
Uh,
is.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I think that some people are doing things like, oh, well, instead of getting more sleep, I'll wear sleep tape, or I know I'm not breathing properly, or this is the precursor to getting a CPAP machine, like all of these things that people are
Yep.
thinking about around it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
So I've got a lot of thoughts on
All
this.
right.
So first of all, hold on a second.
Sure. No problem.
There we go. All right. So what I'm doing now is I just uploaded.
And here's somebody posting on I saw a study that debunks the usefulness of mouth tape, this Barb, and actually be
Uh-huh.
detrimental to some people. She'll try to find it and share it with the
Barb,
community.
I love you. You rock it out, Barb. So, Mike, I just sent you a study.
Okay.
So, this is a study that actually was published about 3 weeks ago. So, it really doesn't get any better than this. Barb Reynolds, you rock, girl. Um, and I just sent you the study. I just emailed it to you, Mike.
Okay.
This was done at the University of London. This was not some offshoot. This was not some private group that was trying to market their wares. And here's what they did is they did a comprehensive literature search on all studies done with mouth tape. They then found the ones that were actually run correctly. And they only found out of 120 articles, they found 24 that actually followed correct protocols, looked at the patients the right way, understood the demographics, used correct scientific methodology. That's still good. 24 studies is pretty good. Went into a full text review. 10 studies met inclusion criteria with a total of 213 patients across the 10 studies. So these folks sat down, they looked across multiple studies. Let me read you the conclusion.
Sure.
The social media trend of mouth taping for individuals with mouth breathing, sleep disordered breathing, or sleep apnea has been reviewed. Based on the data presented by these 10 different studies, it seems that there is potentially serious risk of harm for individuals indiscriminately practicing this trend. Further studies are required to elucidate any clinical benefit this practice may have. To be clear, this is a stupid fucking idea, okay? And let me tell you why.
Sure.
Because if you don't have a sleep study done on you beforehand, you are masking the symptoms of sleep apnea, okay? And there is not a sleep doctor in the universe who's going to tell you that that's an okay thing to do, okay? Because at the end of the day, I'm not so worried about mouth tape if you've been screened, right? So if you've been screened for sleep apnea, let's say you did a home sleep test, no problem, tape your mouth away. However, if you have not been screened for sleep apnea, number one, it's dangerous, right? So when you tape somebody's mouth shut that has sleep apnea, guess what? They still have sleep apnea and they stop breathing. And when they try to gasp for air,
They can't.
they can't. They rip the tape off of their lips. This is some of the most sensitive skin you possibly have. Think about when your lips get chapped and how much they hurt. It rips all of that skin off of there. Now you got to go to sleep with bloody lips. Like, you see where I'm going with this?
Yep.
Like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, the other thing that this study did, which I thought was really smart, was they took everybody out who had nasal congestion or who did not have some type of a sinus assessment. So here is the other problem, is most of the reason why people sleep with their mouth open is because they got stuffed up nose, right? And so here's what you do. It isn't really hard. Number one, buy a fucking air filter, right? Put an air filter in your bedroom. It's the room you spend the most time in the whole house. You might as well have the clearest air there as well, right? Pull out all those particulates, right? Because I'm not saying anybody's got, a dirty bedroom, but to be clear, nobody vacuums under the bed, right?
Yeah.
Nobody looks underneath the dust ruffles, right? Get all of that stuff out of there, because as that circulates, it goes up into your sinuses. And guess what? They inflame. You can't breathe through your nose, so your mouth drops open and you start breathing, right? Also, let's say that you have chronic allergies, right?
Yeah.
Once again, this is very common. Look, we're in the middle of summer, right? We just kind of had spring where all the pollen is out and all the particulates are out. And don't get me wrong, I love being outside. That's actually one of my favorite things to do. But when you're outside and you get all of those stuff in you, it can cause some reactions. So once again, the reasoning behind why people are using mouth tape doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Treat your congestion, okay? And by the way, you won't need mouth tape, and or get a study for sleep apnea. Now, I want to double tap really quickly on the idea of getting a study for sleep apnea before you do mouth tape, because I think it's an important thing that your listeners are going to want to hear.
Sure.
So here's the good news. Since COVID, you no longer need to go to a laboratory and spend the night in a weird place with 27 electrodes glued to your head, respiratory belts, the whole thing. You can actually be sent to your home a wrist-worn device, a ring. There's a whole host of different things that are available and out there. And these can be incredibly accurate devices.
Yeah,
now,
I've had that done. And it was, you go in Canada, I went to the hospital just down the road.
Yeah.
They gave me a thing. They said, bring it back tomorrow. You drop it off.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Now, Canadian healthcare is a little bit different than healthcare here in the United States, right? But same idea set, same principle, right? Anybody, if you're listening here in the US, you can actually go and get a home sleep test done. Here's the thing. You don't have to ask your general practitioner. You don't have to go find a sleep specialist. You can literally go online and do this. Now, full disclosure, my website, thesleepdoctor.com, we do this. We actually have doctors who are board certified in all 50 states. And when you get onto our website, you actually go to a calendar and you set up an appointment with one of our doctors. It won't be me. And then you're talking to them. They say, hey, I think you need a sleep study. They push a button. A sleep study gets mailed to your house. You literally never have to leave your home. It shows up, right? You do it. The next day, the information jumps to your phone, goes to the cloud. You're talking with a doctor in 72 hours, which used to take 7 weeks, right? And now we're moving forward. So one of the things I want people to know also is the cost. Now, I understand up in Canada, Cost structure is different for healthcare. However, here in the US, $200. So $200 US, you get a full sleep study with a doctor interpretation. You get 2 different clinical appointments. Like, it's pretty impressive, all the stuff that you can kind of get done. And to be clear, I'm not the only one. My website is not the only one that does this. There are plenty of people out there that are doing this. So I want to be super duper clear. It's not like I'm the only person. But when you start to look at this, it gets very interesting very quickly. Now, here's the second problem.
Sure.
Which is people don't want to do a home sleep test because they don't want the diagnosis of sleep apnea because they don't want to think that they have to wear CPAP. Right?
Yeah, they jump right there. And they're like, I don't want to have this big scuba diving gear over my face and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's break that down for half a second, because the truth of the matter is that is not necessarily what's going to happen. Now, I want to be very, very clear. I think CPAP is phenomenal. It works 99% of the time. It is literally the only treatment in all of medicine that works as well as that. Okay. However, it's not a lot of fun to wear, right? I mean, the compliance rate is about 35, 40%, right? Now, what I'm going to tell you is when I have patients and I initially put them on CPAP, it sucks. There's no getting around it. There's nothing fun about it. However, if I can get them to hold on and really try it for a good 30 days, it is life-changing. I have patients now who literally were cursing me out when I had them on the CPAP, who now they've lost weight or something has occurred and they no longer require CPAP. They won't give it up. They like it so much. Okay. So the good news here is our bodies are very adaptable. We can adapt to it, but this isn't the only treatment. It is a great treatment, but it is not the only treatment. They make dental appliances now that do roughly the same thing. So a CPAP machine, just for folks to know, it's a little air compressor. It shoots air through a hose, which is sitting on a mask on your nose, hits the area that's compressed, and then opens it up ever so slightly. So basically, it's a hair dryer blowing up your nose all night long. It's more tolerable than that, but it's not by much, right? Dental appliances is one where there's an upper and a lower, and the lower one is migrated forward by about 2 or 3 millimeters, and it naturally opens up your posterior airway space and works that way. So there's no mask, there's no hose, there's no headgear, there's no air blowing up your nose. It's just a physical movement of your jaw. To be clear, you can barely feel it. It only moves your jaw forward by about 2 or 3 millimeters, which is quite small.
Sure.
However, if you're going to do this, I want to put in a word of caution, because there are many of these fly-by-night internet, I can make a mouth guard for you companies out there. And I want to be very clear, that is not what we are talking about. These are created by a dentist, okay, who knows and understands this area of anatomy better than almost anyone, right? And these dentists are now getting board certified in dental sleep medicine, which is a thing. So, and these are the people who also know all the complications that come with these devices, right? And so if they're not done correctly, some people can get jaw pain like TMJ. Some people can get tooth movement, which becomes a real problem over the course of time. So you really don't want, like, if you don't want CPAP, I get it, but please find yourself a sleep dentist who really knows and understands this space. Not your local dentist who says, oh, I've made a few of those before, I can make you one for cheap. That's a terrible idea, okay? You should pay full price for one of these things because it is having a massive effect on your breathing. And I mean, it doesn't get much more important than your breathing. There are also surgical interventions. Surgery is not my favorite, but it is a more permanent cure to the situation versus a treatment where you're wearing it multiple nights. Also, Mike, there's one new thing. It's called Excite OSA, EXCITEOSA.com. This is bizarre, but really cool. You wear this on your tongue for about 25 minutes during the daytime.
Yeah.
And it vibrates across your tongue and it shrinks your tongue by a couple of millimeters. Doesn't change your voice, doesn't change your ability to taste, doesn't change your ability to kiss, nothing, right? It's all the same. It's just a couple of millimeters smaller, which opens up the entire posterior airway space again and allows for more room. So it actually is and that's kind of cutting edge. What is
well, Ksenia is saying she's been doing myofunctional, her daughter's been doing myofunctional therapy, which provides her with exercise to do with her tongue that really improved mouth breathing. So it sounds like this thing helps, is a version of that, or at least can aid with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about myofunctional therapy. So that's
Sure.
really cool stuff. And that's really more along the lines of what we see people who do speech therapy, and those people who are helping people who have different problems with the musculature around their mouth. But she's 100% correct, is you can use those same exercises to strengthen the musculature in this whole area. Give you kind of a funny story here, right? So I used to, a long, long time ago, I diagnosed and treated Rosie O'Donnell live on The View. Okay. Now, this is long before any of their crazy antics and all this stuff, right?
Sure.
So Rosie O'Donnell, been a friend of mine for a gazillion years, right? And when we diagnosed her with sleep apnea, at the time, she had every symptom you could imagine. She was a little bit on the bigger side. And so I was thinking she's going to have rip-roaring sleep apnea, right? Turns out her apnea was fairly mild. And so I was trying to figure out why. And so when I was talking with her, I said, hey, what are you doing these days? And she said, oh, I'm on Broadway. She says, every night I sing on stage, right? It's exactly like what this person was talking about. It's this exercise, this movement and use of this entire musculature actually can help tighten it up and make it improve. So part of the reason I think Rosie had a milder diagnosis is because she was singing every night, right? It's surprising to me that, all these opera singers that are massive don't have sleep apnea. Maybe there's a reason why.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm glad we went down this path because there's a lot of conversations happening in the chat, which is great. I want to go in, and by the way, really quickly, I had a mouth guard done by a dentist. That's another thing too. If you grind your teeth and stuff, you don't go to the drugstore and do that. You get a dentist to do it. But because it opened, because of the grinding, it opened my mouth a little bit more. He said this can actually help with your breathing because he said, quote,
yes,
you have a flaccid uvula. And I'm like, all right, it was partially blocking the airway, but not in a crazy amount. He said by just wearing your mouth guard every night, keeping you from grinding
raises it just a touch.
So you're killing two birds with one stone to a degree. And I'm like, that's fantastic. I want to touch on before we wrap up, because it wouldn't be a book that you've written without a plan.
You know it, brother. Every one of my books has a plan.
So I'm looking at it right now, the sleep, drink, breathe plan. There we go. And it's there's some preparations and such. So why, number one, you talked about the person that, 30 days, if you can get them to wear the CPAP for 30 days, it's going to change their life, getting them to stick with it. So let's talk briefly about this plan before we wrap up, and how someone can ensure that they stick with the plan as much as possible, because as you mentioned, life happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So the plan is specifically set to do very easy things. So first of all, you got to know your chronotype, because you know me, I want to know everybody's chronotype. And that's also part of the way that we help you with your sleep, is by getting you to sleep within that kind of chronotypical swim lane that we talk about. So, step number one is learn your chronotype. I tell you when to get up. I tell you when to go to bed. But I also have you set an alarm on your phone for 5 separate times throughout the day. Now, this might sound familiar, because I did something very similar in Energize, where I had you set an alarm for 5 times a day to move in particular ways. This is very similar. However, we're going to use those times for hydration check-ins and for breathing check-ins. And so what's nice about it is it's very straightforward. Every single week, I give you a little bit more to do. We focus on a little bit of this and a little bit of that. The good news is it is not overwhelming at all, right? So let me give you an example. So during the first week, right, you have different what we call to-dos. You have a sleep to-do, a drink to-do, and a breathe to-do, right? So what is your sleep to-do during the first week? Get up when the alarm goes off. Don't hit the snooze. Wake up at the same time. Go outside and get 15 minutes of sunshine. That's it. That's your whole assignment for sleeping for the first week. For your drink to-dos, all I ask you to do is drink 6 sips, not gulp, 16 ounces of water, about an ounce per swallow. So it should take you, a little while to do that. And then check your morning urine color, like you were mentioning earlier, right? If it's pale yellow, that's good. If it's concentrated, means you're probably not getting enough water. And then your breathe to do. Take 15 deep breaths. That's it. I mean, again, this is not super complicated. This is, I'm going to break you in slowly and I'm going to get you there, because the goal here is to create habits, right? To create a breathing habit, create a hydration habit, and to create a sleep habit. Because once we've learned that you lock in your habitual cycles, it's so much easier for you to continue to do what we want you to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as an example, when we talk about CPAP, right? Once you get used to CPAP, now you're used to it, and you're same principles here. Once you're used to drinking water at this time, and this time, once you're used to doing a little breath work in the morning, maybe a little breath work before bed, once you're used to waking up at the same time, it all becomes habitual, and that's when the magic really happens. And so what's cool about the program is it takes you there, but by the third week, you are fully engaged. It's not particularly hard to do. And each one of the areas, sleeping, hydration, and breathing, is absolutely improving compared to your baseline.
Well, before we wrap up, here's what Barb had to say. She just got an
Oh,
Audible
thanks,
copy.
Barb.
The book is called Sleep, Drink, Breathe, Simple Daily Habits for Profound Long-Term Health. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can click on the link. It's in the description. If you're listening to the podcast episode, then of course we'll have a link to it in the show notes. But Michael, where can people pick up this book, and where can people keep up with the work that you're doing?
Sure. So the book is easy to find, Amazon, any major online book retailer. Also, I'm the one who actually read the audio version. I like it when authors do that because I also, by the way, tell funny stories that aren't actually in the book, because I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, this reminds me of, and they keep it in. And so it's a lot of fun. So
There's no pronunciation issues. Jackie got her copy, by the way, at the beginning of the show. Before you even opened your mouth, she got it.
You're amazing, Jackie.
And Janet added, she's going to make sure that she had it on Spotify. So again, lots of, and people can go to is it sleepdoctor.com, thesleepdoctor.com, right?
So if people want to learn more, so number one, and we'll put this into the show notes. If you want to learn about how to do a home sleep test, then you go to www.sleepdoctor.com/Dr. Mike. So DRMIKE. That'll lead you right to that spot on the page if that's what you're interested in. If you're interested more in just general information, then it's just Sleep Doctor or The Sleep Doctor. We own both. You can come to the site. I probably have north of 300 or 400 articles, but I'll tell you where I've been really spending my time lately: YouTube. We have really done a great job. We have almost 800 videos, including the shorts, on YouTube, and the channel is really becoming more and more successful these days. We've focused a little bit more on, because I'm getting older, more kind of as you get older, what does your sleep look like? So there's a lot of now new stuff on sleep for seniors. So if anybody out there, I mean, I know it's not necessarily the greatest term. At 57, I definitely think I'm a senior. I think almost anybody over 50 is probably a senior.
We're headed there.
Take that as a compliment.
Yeah. No discount yet, but yeah.
Right, exactly. No discount yet, but it should be. And so I think that's going to be important for folks as well, is check out the YouTube channel. But again, wherever you can get your sleep information, if you happen to be on any internet media, it's thesleepdoctor.com.
Dr. Michael Breus, thanks once again for joining me for a productive conversation.
Always. This was super fun. I love the whole productivity angle. I think it makes a lot of sense. And it really bodes well with sleep. Like, to be clear, there ain't no universe you're going to be productive if you ain't sleeping.